What you are about to see defies any brief verbal description.
I never said there were 30 people. I said 24.
Perhaps as many as 30 teenage boys brutally tortured and buried in and around the Houston area.
It would almost appear to be fiction.
We got bodies here, we got bodies there.
Scripted with the full intention of shocking readers over and over again.
On August the 8th, obviously 1973, Dean Corll was shot and killed by Elmer Wayne Henley at his house in Pasadena.
To begin with, he wanted to kill me.
Once that investigation started rolling, it turned into something just more than strictly a homicide.
Do you think many of them went under any torture?
Well, when you're fooling with a nut like this, that's a pervert, you can expect most anything.
Things they did to these boys were the most horrendous things that no one should ever have to go through.
It was just simply brutal.
Elmer Wayne Henley confessed, along with another young man, David Brooks, to helping Dean Corll engineer a long conspiracy of murder to kidnap young boys and kill them, which led them here to Silver Bell Street. Initially, I think there were 17 bodies found here.
I do vividly remember us searching for him.
I didn't think it would still be this painful, this far out, but I guess it will.
People say that time has a way of healing. It does. But always a scar.
It is a look at what regrettably may become the most sordid story in the annals of American crime.
So many lives involved, so many killed over such a long period of time, and all of it going undetected.
Just anonymously buried or dumped somewhere and just left.
We know there's more bodies of young boys out there somewhere.
Henley, Brooks, and Corll, they're generally credited with at least 28 murders. Their nickname that they're given still to this day is the Houston Mass Murders. The word serial killer wasn't even coined. It didn't even exist.
Get your pictures.
The fact that these three found each other, met each other, collaborated in one of the largest serial killings in this country's history still to this day resonates with so many people.
It's been nearly 50 years since Dean Corll, with help at times from David Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley, carried out one of the worst serial killings in history. Nearly 30 victims, boys and young men ages 13 to 20. Many people involved in the case have since passed away. Some have even taken their own lives due to the weight of the gruesome crimes. Many loved ones have also died, still wondering why their son or brother was taken away in such a horrific manner. Only one set of parents is still alive today, the mother and father of the last victim, the first to be found.
We lived in a very tight-knit neighborhood. I mean, we knew all the families on both sides of the street.
It was August 1973. Richard Nixon was president, The Exorcist was big at the box office, and on the southeast side of Houston, life was seemingly safe and slow.
It was very normal to be outside and,
James Stanton Dramala, the oldest child of Elaine and James Dramala.
We went to church every week. We, tried to bring them up the best we could, and he was just a good kid.
Wanted to get a little more out of his Friday night with a bike ride in search of returnable bottles.
He was going to this 7-Eleven store, bowling alley, all these neighborhood places trying to muster up enough bottles to turn them in to make more money to take his girlfriend out.
It was a noble endeavor, and the last Friday with his family.
I tried to stop him, and I was in the kitchen, and he came in there and he says, "I'm going out to ride my bike. Dad said I could." I said, "Stanton, don't go." I said, "It's already getting dark. You don't need to be out there by yourself." We went on family bike rides after dark, all four of us together. but I didn't want him to go by himself. And he was tall for his age. He was 5'9". And he patted me on top of the head and he said, "Don't worry, Mom, I won't be gone but just a little bit." And then he didn't come back. And I walked the floors all that night and didn't know what to do. And he never heard from him again. This is the last photo we had of him, 13.
Stanton was 13, a student at DD Middle School and a good kid.
I tell people we're very Mayberry because we were. You know, Mom would stay at home. My dad was a college teacher and dinner on the table by 6 every night, you know, that kind of thing.
This was before his hair got long.
The Dramalas lived in a modest neighborhood in a part of Houston that bordered neighboring Pasadena. For days, they searched for Stanton.
We drove and looked, and we went to places, you know, like the bowling alley, and we went up to the parks, and we just drove and looked everywhere, places we thought he might be, and then he wasn't.
And they quickly turned to police for help.
The police said that the child had to be gone for 48 hours before you could classify him as missing. Until then, they were runaways, and made my blood boil. Never ran away before in his life, had no reason to, had a good home, good family, good friends, and he lumped them, they lumped him in as runaways.
Yeah, that hurt both of us really bad.
What they didn't know is that just 20 miles north in the Heights area of Houston,
yeah, it's completely the other side of town from where we were.
Dozens of other teens and young men had also disappeared, starting with 18-year-old Jeffrey Conan.
And that's always remained a mystery is, you know, how can so many young boys and teenagers either vanish or disappear?
Conan vanished in September 1970 while hitchhiking home from college. 3 months later, James Glass and Danny Yates, both 14, went missing after a church rally. The following January, brothers Donald and Jerry Waldrop disappeared while walking home. On March 9, 1971, Randall Harvey was last seen riding his bike to work. In May 1971, 13-year-old David Hilligist and 16-year-old Gregory Winkle were taken, and there were almost 20 more, ranging in age from 14 to 20, who vanished between then and 1973. Reuben Haney, Frank Aguirre, Mark Scott, Johnny Ray Delhomme, Billy Balch, Stephen Sickman, Roy Bunton, Wally Simino, Richard Hembry, Willard Branch, Richard Kempner, Jeffrey Lyles, William Lawrence, Raymond Blackburn, Homer Garcia, John Sellers, Michael Balch, whose brother went missing a year earlier, Marty Ray Jones, and Charles Cobble. A list of nearly 30, and when many of their families reported them missing, it did not get the attention it deserved.
You look at the time period that this took place in. You didn't have the internet, you didn't have cable, you didn't have cell phones, you didn't have anything like that. You didn't have advocates like me. You didn't have people going around, you know, saying nothing was ever really put together. And sadly, for the most part, a majority of the victims were categorized as runaways, throwaways.
So while there were isolated searches, the disappearances were not publicly connected by police, and so no one had any reason to fear.
We never really were afraid of anything because we didn't know anything like this was happening.
The monster and his accomplices.
Demented. Totally demented. Dean Corll's mom said, "That's not like him. He wouldn't do that." End quote. Well, it was exactly like him. He did do that.
Who would eventually be revealed.
I saw him change into a different person. His body swelled up. His eyes got big. He was a completely different personality. I would call it demonic.
When you're fooling with a nut like this, that's a pervert, you can expect most anything. Or they use instruments and a rack and so forth for their sex acts.
Good evening. Profile, a Houston tragedy, is only a title, for what you are about to see defies any brief verbal description. It is a look at what regrettably may become the most sordid story in the annals of American crime. Perhaps as many as 30 teenage boys brutally tortured, murdered, and buried in and around the Houston area.
In August 1973, an unbelievable scene.
There was nothing but grass and dirt, and there were a bunch of cars, and I remember going into the boat sheds. It was just mud on the ground. There wasn't any pavement in the ones I went in, and there were just holes dug everywhere, and there were people digging everywhere. And it was getting dark when they were still pulling bodies out, and they were pulling, half bodies out and whole bodies out, and it was just a dark, scary feeling at that point, at night when it was getting nighttime, wondering how long this was going to go on, how many they would find.
A 17-year-old named Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. led police to this mass gravesite after a bizarre confession.
Picked up, or I helped him get rather, and he raped him, ended up killing him, brought him down here and buried him.
Dean Arnold Corll, shy and serious as a child, a sadistic murderous mastermind as an adult. He used his mother's candy business to endear himself to the neighborhood children.
Dean Corll was given the Candyman because he gave out candy to the neighborhood, and he had a candy shop.
In the mid-1960s, Corll Candy Company sat across the street from Helms Elementary in the Heights area of Houston. Corll's mother started the business. He carried it on, only leaving for a 10-month stint in the United States Army. He was honorably discharged in June 1965.
There was no reputation. It wasn't like he never got in trouble before.
Corll was born in Indiana and moved with his parents to Texas. By his late 20s, working for the candy company, he earned the nickname Candyman.
Sometimes we'd walk over there and just stand there, and he would give us some of the pralines.
And in 1967, befriended 12-year-old David Owen Brooks, a sixth grader whose parents were divorced. Their relationship turned sexual. Brooks spent more and more time with Corll, and Corll enlisted him to bring him teenage boys. In return, he paid Brooks in cash and with a Corvette.
He was a strange guy. He gave David a Corvette, and David was riding around in his Corvette, and everybody was wondering, why did David get a Corvette?
By 1971, Brooks introduced Corll to Henley, likely an intended victim. Instead, Henley was deemed useful, and Corll decided he could also help procure boys. Meantime, the disappearances mounted. Many of the teens were friends with Brooks and/or Henley. Victim David Hilligist was Henley's neighbor.
The answer was right under our nose, so to speak, and we didn't recognize it. We never in any way thought Wayne did anything, because he was such a polite, nice boy. We knew him as a kid, and surely seemed like such a compassionate person that I felt he always offered his sympathy, always asked about David, and even helped us distribute some of our reward posters.
By summer 1973, Corll was living at 2020 Lamar Drive in Pasadena.
And I'd see him in the backyard drinking some iced tea or something, and he'd wave to me, and I'd wave at him, but I didn't think anything of it,
Henley, then 17, invited Tim Curley to drink and sniff paint fumes with them. They picked up Henley's friend, Rhonda Williams, along the way. Neither of them talked about that night for decades until these interviews.
I've survived it one day at a time and looked at it as it's just one day in 55 years of my life. It wasn't the most pleasant, but it was a day in my life. And I have two choices: either accept it and move on, or kill myself.
Physically and mentally, it's taken my life from me.
Rhonda did not want her face to be shown. Tim remembered her vividly.
I remember her as the most beautiful woman or girl that I've ever seen. She was stunning.
He was a survivor of what would soon be exposed as a years-long killing spree. He walked out of 2020 Lamar after being tied naked to a torture board inside, rescued just moments before being sexually tortured and likely killed.
Someone ties you to a board. The odds are pretty good you're not gonna walk out of there.
Corll was furious that Henley had brought a girl to the house, but he was still focused on Tim. It was the 20-year-old that he wanted that night.
Corll had told Henley he wanted Curly. He singled him out. In other words, he placed his order, and Henley delivered.
The three teenagers, Wayne, Tim, and Rhonda, all passed out after smoking and drinking, and when they woke up, it was to Corll's violence.
He started kicking me and, said, "Wake up, bitch." And he said that a few times to me and called me names, and he'd be kicking at my ribs and all.
And anger.
It was a commanding voice. I didn't even open my eyes. It was a commanding voice saying, "Put your hands behind your back. Roll over and put your hands behind your back." And I said, "Oh, goodness. Going to jail." So I just put my hands behind my back. I thought it was the police.
It was worse. Corll was preparing to torture him.
Picked me up like a baby and took me into a back bedroom that had a thick plastic covering the whole floor. And there were 2 boards, I guess you could say torture boards, side by side with holes bored in all 4 corners. And he handcuffed me one hand at a time, took my shirt off the other arm, then he handcuffed that one and handcuffed the first arm, and did the same thing with my feet and undressed me.
And you could see Tim. Tim was naked and he was on his stomach, and Tim was crying to get loose, and he was starting to get hysterical.
Tim was tied face down on one side of the board. Rhonda was on her back on the other side. According to Henley's police statement, Corll wanted him to have sex with Rhonda. That's when Rhonda broke through to him.
Rhonda asked me, "Is this for real?" And she was laying on her back. And I told her yes. And she says, "Are you going to do anything about it?" And looking at her, I could see that whatever answer I gave her, she was going to go with. And I believe the fact that someone depended on me to do something about it was just enough. And I told her, yeah, I'm going to do something about it.
He grabbed a .22 caliber pistol nearby that police later confirmed had been used to kill other victims. Henley had Corll in his sights.
He said, "Dean, this has gone far enough." And Dean stood up, and I saw him change into a different person. His body swelled up, his eyes got big. He was a completely different personality. I would call it demonic. And he raised his arms like a bear charging and rushed Wayne, saying, "Kill me, Wayne, kill me." And I truly believe he didn't think Wayne would do it. He emptied the gun at him.
Corll tripped into the hallway, slid down the wall,
and he was dead.
I woke up and he was clamping handcuffs on me.
10 minutes later, Henley called Pasadena police and reported the shooting. Only he and David Brooks knew it would get worse.
Now, David Brooks is another person who has been named. Now, what role did he play in all of this?
Same as mine.
And the full impact of how lucky I wasn't until later. As I said, driving, that's when it really began to set in. And then it just got worse after that as the body count rose.
There were just holes dug everywhere, and there were people digging everywhere. And it was getting dark when they were still pulling bodies out, and they were pulling, half bodies out and whole bodies out. And it was just a dark, scary feeling wondering how long this was going to go on, how many they would find.
I was hollering at him. Tim was hollering at him.
After the chaos of the deadly shooting at the house at 2020 Lamar,
He emptied the gun at him.
a confession no one saw coming.
He had told me there were bodies there, but you don't expect to find that many bodies.
In police custody, 17-year-old Elmer Wayne Henley said he shot 33-year-old Dean Corll in self-defense and that he killed several boys as well. In his sworn police affidavit, he said he had known Corll for 2 to 3 years and that he and David Brooks found him boys to torture, rape, and kill. Some of the victims were their friends, and Corll paid them up to $200 for each one. Henley also said he could show them where they were buried.
I was a kid. I was only 18 years old, and I don't think I was really ready to see something like that.
Bob Jackson was just starting out in TV news when he got the assignment that took him to Southwest Boat Storage on Silverbill. Henley was there with police, showing them where some of Corll's victims had been buried. It was there that Henley made his first phone call to his mother in custody.
Elmer Wayne Henley spoke those words that I don't think anybody will ever forget. Mama, I killed Dean.
Mama, I killed Dean.
Detective David Milliken was the lead on the case.
We went inside and you could see some of the dirt was bounded up in one place. It was kind of dried and cracked, so we started scooping it away and we found the first victim.
In all, the bodies of 17 boys and young men were unearthed here in varying states of decay. Many had been wrapped in plastic, they had been shot or strangled, they died horrible deaths.
It was just simply brutal. It was not an easy death. It was agonizingly and painful, and it took a long time, and then they were just anonymously buried or dumped somewhere.
David Brooks turned himself in the next day, and Henley opened up even more. For the next 4 days, Brooks and Henley accompanied police to the beach at High Island, where they found 5 bodies. A 6th was found in 1983, and to the woods at Lake Sam Rayburn, where they found 4 victims.
He started to tell me, first off, that there were more bodies, not only in that boat stall, but there were some on High Island and some up close to Lake Sam Rayburn. And then I said, give me some names, give me the names that you know. So he started telling me, we got this boy and we shot him, or we got that boy and we strangled him. And he remembered names and how they were killed.
How would you classify this series of crimes? Just like I said a while ago, a hell of a sadistic type of a clown that'd pull something like this.
Local news crews had incredible access.
Back then, there was no police tape. We could go wherever we wanted. We were right there. I was right next to a grave site, looking down. To this day, I try not to think about it. It bothers me, something that gruesome you don't want to share with other people.
Brooks denied his involvement in the torture and murders, but admitted to being present during some of them. Henley confessed to participating in as many as 9 killings. They would lure the victims with a ruse or the promise of getting high. Corll would use instruments and equipment to torture and kill them. At nearly 30 victims, it was the worst case of serial murder in the United States.
Houston Police Chief Herman.
Police were criticized for missing patterns.
There was no pattern in these runaways at all. There's just as many runaways in other areas of the city as there are in the Heights. For instance, in 1972, in the Heights area, we've recorded 187 reported runaways, which is no higher than some other areas of the city.
I'm sorry that I decided to leave.
The victims were often classified as runaways, and sometimes their parents or friends would get phone calls or letters.
Hope you understand, but I had to go.
They had him write a ransom note to us.
To fool them. Stanton Dramala was the first victim found at the boat shed.
They could have acted more expeditiously than call him a runaway. It seemed like there was, at that time, should have been more slots that you could have put the guys in. Runaways, stolen, lost, murdered. There's a lot of categories they could have been put in, but instead they only had 2, runaway or missing.
That was hurtful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because we knew it wasn't either one. Wasn't a runaway, wasn't lost. He knew exactly where he was supposed to be. It just was not fair to him or the family, all of them. Not just our family, but all the families.
For the Dramalas and dozens of other victims' families, ahead were trials and what they described as constant pestering from the justice system.
Just put him in there and leave him.
And from Elmer Wayne Henley himself.
If I have guilt feelings, they're not for public consumption. I don't need the public to forgive me.
The trail of graves stretched into the piney woods.
You told me there were bodies there, but you don't expect to find that many bodies. And we started digging, and the more we dug, the more we found. And they started mounting up.
On August 8th, 1973, one homicide revealed more than 24 more.
He's a monster. They all were monsters.
17-year-old Elmer Wayne Henley and 18-year-old David Owen Brooks signed confessions, admitting to their involvement with Dean Corll, and they led police to the victims' bodies. By the following month, a Harris County grand jury had indicted Brooks for a total of 4 murders and Henley for 6. The indictments did not include Corll's death, which had been ruled self-defense. Henley and Brooks were tried separately. Henley's was first. His trial relocated to San Antonio, where the jury saw the torture board and the testimony was graphic. Henley was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 6 consecutive 99-year terms. An appeal won him a retrial 4 years later, during which he was again found guilty, but his sentence this time was 6 concurrent 99-year terms. Brooks was also found guilty, but only of 1 murder and sentenced to life in prison. The death penalty was not an option.
That was that little window gap that you had where the U.S. Supreme Court ruled the death penalty unconstitutional. So you couldn't even seek the death sentence, whom obviously, if you support the death penalty, this is why we would have a death penalty, is for someone who's responsible for the death of 28 young boys.
Tried to portray itself as a victim.
The Dramalas participated in Henley's trial and were glad to get it over with. They still had Stanton's younger sister to raise.
It's affected me in a lot of aspects of my life. First off, just how they continued to raise me after this happened. They became extremely protective.
Within 6 years of Stanton's death, Brooks was eligible for parole. Henley came up a year later. For the Dramalas, their suffering was compounded.
Well, they were staggered. Henley was one, Brooks was the other. And we got through with Brooks, we had to fight for Henley. Got through with Henley, Brooks was coming back. So we lived this nightmare over and over. Sort of like a bad film. Just keep reliving it.
And while Brooks stayed private, Henley marketed his art, even selling out a gallery show within minutes as he sat behind bars. And he often gave vague and unremorseful interviews. This is him.
You can't change the past. And to constantly dwell on the past leaves you in the past.
In 2008.
What happened to those people was terrible. And to make anything less of it by making it a daily conversation, I think would be belittling.
Well, I've been very upset with Henley many times over the years at interviews he's done and things he's said and things his parents, well, his mother, I don't know about his parents, but his mother, I've never seen his daddy, so I don't know, but he, and him trying to sell his art.
All of it part of the ongoing pain for nearly 50 years.
That's the reason I asked you the other day, do you have any children? Because it's tough. It's tough to bury a child. It's supposed to be the other way around. They're supposed to be burying you. So, tough.
The Dramalas learned that their son, 13-year-old Stanton, who was riding his bike in search of returnable bottles back in 1973, was likely lured with the promise of more bottles. He was trying to earn enough money to take his girlfriend to the movies. His parents are not sure how long Stanton lived or whether he suffered, and they've never driven by the boat storage or 2020 Lamar. They don't want their good memories of their blonde-haired boy infected.
We never did that.
And this within a half a mile where we're sitting right now. I can almost throw a stone and hit it.
Well, one thing that I always felt was a blessing for us, that I felt really sorry for the other parents, and that is that Stanton was only missing and we didn't know what happened to him for 5 days. For others, it was years.
Stanton was the first boy found.
The Dramalas chose to stay near the memory of their son.
This is Elaine Dramala in 1983.
You used to cooking supper for 4, and suddenly it's only 3. You find yourself baking 4 potatoes, setting 4 plates, and then crying over the fact that you did.
As many as 9 bodies were not identified until years later, one as recent as 2013. One victim has never been identified.
The unidentified boy, 3356, had so much that we could provide as information to people who might have known him. Why is he the one we can't get ID'd? Well, it's kind of sloppy, but a whole different time.
The recovery of the victims' bodies at 4500 Silver Bell in Houston in 1973 looked starkly different from the orderly crime scenes of today. Local news coverage showed jail trustees digging up shallow graves and carrying out remains.
It's been so many years.
Photographer Bob Jackson was there that night.
I couldn't believe what we were seeing because there was just so many people running around. Police, inmates, families of people working here. There was a whole lot to take in.
And in the end, there were 3 locations: the boat storage, the beach at High Island, and a property almost 3 hours away near Lake Sam Rayburn. The majority of bodies were identified in the months after they were found, but as many as 9 were not. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Sharon Derrick was hired in 2006 at what was then the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office to help clear unidentified cases, and she started with 3 from 1973.
These 3, 3349, 3356, and 3378, were in boxes rather than in body bags and on trays in that large room. And the boxes said 1973 mass murders on them.
Derrick was in high school in 1973 and remembered the headlines.
It was so horrible, it just like locked in my mind.
In 2008, she identified 3349 as Randall Lee Harvey, a Heights teenager who went missing in March 1971. Derrick found an old message from a 16-year-old girl who suspected her brother was a victim, which put her on the right trail.
There was a name, just a first name on there, but I was able to eventually, after a lot of computer work, figure out who she was, and then I had to find her in current day. Was able to find her through her name being in an obituary for someone else. She was related to that person. And it just went on, and finally I found her, and she also had a sister, and they both submitted DNA specimens.
9 months later, the results were in, and Derrick delivered the news.
It's like it just happened. And they were grateful. They were so kind to me, but they were very, very sad.
In 2010, 3378 was identified as 15-year-old Michael Anthony Balch, who disappeared in July 1973. His brother Billy was also murdered by Corll a year earlier. For decades, their family thought the 2 sets of remains buried here at this Houston cemetery belonged to the brothers until an exhumation in early 2011 proved them wrong. Then Dr. Derrick used new science to analyze old bones to right a wrong.
There is a family out there who never knew what happened to their teenage son, brother. And all these years, I'm sure they are still wondering. And so hopefully we'll be able to learn who this individual is and give that family an answer.
And later that year, after DNA analysis, the misidentified remains were identified as belonging to 19-year-old Roy Eugene Bunton, who was last seen in August 1972.
These boys are just a part of my life now.
In 2013, Derek identified 17-year-old Donnie Falcon. She has since left Harris County and is now teaching at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. There is still an unidentified victim. Does that tug at you?
Yes, of course it does. And every once in a while I sit down and look at Ancestry.
3356 was found in the boat shed. He was wearing a Catalina swimsuit and a shirt with an American flag and peace sign above the letter and number combination L84MF.
Late for my funeral is what everybody thinks.
She once received a potential clue.
Someone sent me a package that had no return address and was just, addressed to me at the medical examiner's office. And inside there were several photos of this boy in compromising positions. And so I cropped them and put them out there. The note in the envelope said, "This boy is Bobby French, and David Brooks killed him 15 minutes after these photos were taken."
Derek never got any tips. She now thinks Bobby French was not his real name. She is still hopeful.
The right person will know who that person is, and we can actually close this case, and that would be marvelous.
But just as that search continues,
we got a lot of work to do.
A new one begins.
It's a cold case, and but we know there's more victims out there. You guys ask questions, I'll give answers if I got them. We've been working on this for a while.
On a hot August day in 2021, 48 years to the day since police uncovered the unthinkable, Tim Miller, the founder of Texas EquiSearch, a search organization, stood across the street from where 17 bodies were discovered.
This guy would come out here and do his business.
Dean Corll, the Candyman, was the mastermind behind the sexual torture and murder of nearly 30 boys and young men in the early 1970s until August 8th, 1973.
This killing was never going to stop until Elmer Wayne Henley killed him.
When Henley shot and killed Corll before he could kill someone else. Henley and a second accomplice, David Brooks, then led police to the victims in 3 different locations across Texas. Many believe there are more yet to be found.
He didn't just get started when Wayne and Brooks got hooked up with him. And Dean was older. Dean traveled around quite a bit prior to, so is there other ones outside of this greater Houston area? Probably is.
This is a plastic wrap that was found at the house.
Miller is working with Pasadena Police, the lead investigative agency, for decades as they embark on a new search. In fact, 3 months after that news conference, he was in the backyard of Corll's old house on Lamar, where it all came to an end, digging. And Miller knows something about searching.
That was the worst time of my life.
His 16-year-old daughter, Laura, was kidnapped and murdered in 1984. It wasn't until 17 months later that her remains were found.
I remember like it was yesterday when she was positively ID'd. I took that small sigh of relief. At least I know. The not knowing was worse, far worse. So maybe we can hopefully give some other family or families that same sigh of relief.
Credible information led Miller to the backyard. On this day, they found nothing, but he is also communicating with Henley himself, who he says, based on his knowledge of Corll, is suggesting other places to look.
He told me, he says, if I knew exactly and I was involved in them, he said, I'd tell you. He said, because I got 6 life sentences. What else are they going to do to me? He said, right, I don't have anything to gain. I don't have anything to lose right now.
According to police records, Corll had multiple rental properties, and the speculation about the possibility of more victims has never been disproven. 42 boys were reported missing in Houston in the early 1970s. 10 years after the killings were exposed, Doug Schaefer, part of the team who prosecuted Henley, talked about a conversation he said he had with him. one Henley has never confirmed.
Wayne called me aside one day. There was a break in the trial, and he said, could you cut me a little slack on this case and give me, recommend a lighter sentence? And I said, what all for? He said, well, I'm a little bit upset. He said, I've been reading the paper in the jail, and this fellow Gacy up in Illinois, they found 33, and that beats my record. I had the record. And he said, what you folks didn't know, and you haven't found yet, says, I've got about 10 more bodies out there, and I'll tell you where they are if I get my record back, and you'll give me something cut on my time.
The deal was never done. Elaine and James Dramala's son Stanton was the last victim.
Yeah, I think if there's any chance of overturning a stone to find more answers for those people that are still missing their child or children, use it. Definitely use it.
Brooks, who had other illnesses, died at a hospital from COVID-19 in 2020. He was 65 and still serving a life sentence. Henley remains in prison. He was last denied parole in 2015. His next scheduled parole review date is October 2025.
Probably the next one that we have may very well be our last one, because we're no spring chickens.
The Dramalas, their daughter Michelle Wilson, and victims advocate Andy Kahn were part of the driving force behind a change in Texas law. Prisoners serving a life sentence for a capital offense once came up for review every 1 to 5 years. The Dramalas felt re-victimized by Brooks and Henley every time.
Henley and Brooks have been reviewed for parole over 20 times, every 2-3 years. And it made zero sense. Because, like I said, let's be honest, you're not going to parole a serial killer unless you want a career death. It's just not feasible. So why are we putting these families through this needless pain, grief, and agony and emotional turmoil every few years when this is what we call a no-brainer?
In 2015, the law changed.
Talk about the ironies of ironies. It's almost like the crime god said, you know, congratulations, you did this. And oh, by the way, guess who's going to be the first person reviewed under this new law? It was Elmer Wayne Henley.
The setoff is now 10 years.
That to me is a win-win-win. And that makes me feel good about a lot of the pain because I'm helping other people.
Yes, that was a great day.
It lightened our load.
With each at 80 years old,
Yep.
the Dramalas are the only parents still alive to fight Henley's parole.
And hopefully we'll be able to see him draw his last breath before we draw ours.
Their daughter vows to carry the torch. After Stanton's death and all these years of pain, she is proud of her parents.
And I don't know how my mom and dad have made it. And quite honestly, I admire the heck out of them because most parents would have divorced over what they went through.
Their innocent 13-year-old son Stanton taken away in the Candyman murders, unwantedly thrust with dozens more into Houston's dark history for nearly 50 years.
I was kind of stunned that that many people could just disappear.
I watched him turn into a monster before my eyes.
Physically and mentally, it's taken my life from me.
We talked about this morning, all these years, what he would have been, could have been. And it always reverts back to zero. Didn't get a chance.